This is just one of a fleet of ambulances used by the gang. The scale of the business was described in court as audacious. They used hiding places throughout the ambulance, including this one where Class A drugs were found. They even carried a bogus patient to make the scheme seem more convincing.
The sirens were silent. The stretcher collapsed. And beneath the floorboards of a vehicle built to save lives lay a cargo that would destroy them. On June 16, 2015, officers from the National Crime Agency and West Midlands Police moved in on a Dutch-registered ambulance parked inside a scrapyard in Smethwick. What they found stunned even the most seasoned investigators: packages of cocaine, heroin, and ecstasy hidden in sophisticated compartments beneath the ambulance floor. The haul was valued at up to £1.6 billion, one of the largest potential drug seizures ever uncovered in the United Kingdom. The ambulance had crossed the channel from the Netherlands, blending in among legitimate emergency vehicles. Its driver wore a paramedic's uniform, his supposed patient on crutches, both acting out a scene of care and urgency. But this was no rescue. It was deception, meticulously planned and executed. Behind the operation stood Olof Schoon, a Dutch national posing as the head of a medical transport company. His business moved more than patients, it moved poison, disguised as mercy. The only casualty that night was the law itself. This is the story of the fake ambulance cartel, how a man who claimed to save lives built one of Britain's most elaborate drug smuggling networks. Criminals like this count on you looking away. Don't. Hit subscribe because the next story might already be rolling through your own streets. Amsterdam, the late 1980s. A city balancing progress and vice. Beneath the postcard canals, another economy thrived, one fueled by hashish, heroin, and later, cocaine. For a young man like Olof Schoon, it was impossible not to notice. He grew up on the quieter edges of the city, where working-class families lived within reach of the docks and distribution routes that would later shape his life. The Netherlands was fast becoming Europe's main gateway for drugs from South America, and Skoon was taking notes. He wasn't a street dealer. Not a fighter. He was observant. Even in his youth, Skoon had an eye for logistics, how goods moved, how authorities looked the other way, how a van could carry anything if it looked official enough. By his late 20s, Skoon turned that curiosity into a business. He registered a medical transport company, one of many small firms offering ambulance-style vehicles to move patients and equipment across borders. It looked legitimate. It was legitimate, at first. He built contacts across Europe, importers, mechanics, customs brokers. And through those connections came whispers of opportunity, how the same transport routes used for medical supplies could carry something far more profitable. Authorities would later describe Skoon as methodical, disciplined, and unassuming. Traits that helped him blend professionalism with criminal intent. His vehicles were kept spotless. His paperwork, always in order. What no one realized then was that the business designed to save lives would soon become a perfect cover to destroy them. Skoon's entry into organized smuggling didn't start with the billion-pound loads or the fleet of fake ambulances. It began quietly, with a few modified vans and a handful of trusted men willing to play their parts. From Dutch court records, investigators later pieced together how Skoon's legitimate ambulance service became a smuggling network. He began recruiting, carefully. Mechanics who knew how to conceal wiring. Drivers who could pass for paramedics. Even men are ready to wear crutches and play the role of a patient during border checks. Each vehicle was a prototype, a test of concealment and deception. Trips were made along the Hook of Holland to Harwich ferry route, one of the busiest commercial crossings in Europe. At first, the loads were small, sample quantities hidden behind medical gear, folded stretchers, or inside modified walls. For every run that went unnoticed, Skoon grew bolder. More vehicles were purchased, more compartments engineered. Police would later find that custom-made rivet guns were used to seal drug hides inside the ambulance panels. a detail that became key evidence when one was discovered with Leonardus Bielsma's DNA on it. By early 2014, Olof Schoon's operation had outgrown its cover. What started as a handful of test runs had evolved into a cross-border smuggling empire. The ambulances no longer carried patients, they carried profit. According to the National Crime Agency, Skoon's ring made up to 45 trips between the Netherlands and the United Kingdom, each crossing carefully disguised as a legitimate medical transfer. The figures were staggering. Investigators would later estimate the total street value of the drugs moved and seized at over £1.6 billion. Each vehicle was meticulously prepared. Compartments were built behind walls and beneath stretchers. Paramedic uniforms were pressed, insurance documents were filed, and fake hospital paperwork listed destinations like the Royal London Hospital, a detail designed to discourage border scrutiny. The shipments contained hundreds of kilograms of cocaine, heroin, and MDMA, often hidden within fully taxed, fully insured ambulances registered under Skoon's company in the Netherlands. The illusion was flawless. To the untrained eye, they were simply part of the European medical transport network. But the volume drew attention. Border officials began to notice repeated ferry crossings through Harwich, Hull, and other eastern ports, often made by the same vehicles under minor alterations. Surveillance teams started logging license plates. The National Crime Agency quietly linked the movements to British drop-off points in London, West Yorkshire, and the Midlands, where the drugs were distributed through local networks. Behind the scenes, the tension grew. Each successful run invited more risk. Customs data was being compared, and digital trails began to overlap. Skoon's empire was running at full speed, but the noise it created was beginning to echo. They looked official, professional, untouchable. But so did every criminal network before it fell. Subscribe now, because if you think this couldn't happen in your city, you're exactly who they count on. At its height, Olof Schoon's organization didn't look like a criminal network, it looked like a legitimate enterprise. The ambulances were real, the registrations genuine, and every vehicle was fully taxed and insured under a Dutch transport company operating from registered business premises. Drivers carried uniforms, ID cards, and even medical equipment. The illusion was complete, a humanitarian service on paper, and a billion-pound trafficking route in reality. According to court documents and the National Crime Agency's findings, Skoon managed the operation like a logistics empire. Each trip was recorded as a patient transfer, with falsified medical records and destinations that included well-known British hospitals. On one recorded occasion, paperwork claimed a journey to the Royal London Hospital, but the only thing being delivered was cocaine. The ambulances moved quietly across Europe's highways, often via the Hook of Holland ferry to Harwich, then inland to London, the Midlands, or West Yorkshire. British distribution cells would receive the shipments, break them down, and funnel the profits back across the channel. The system was efficient, and the money was constant. Behind that polished surface, though, cracks began to show. Drivers grew anxious about repeat trips. A few noticed customs officials taking longer looks at their documents. Ferry logs revealed patterns the traffickers had overlooked: multiple vehicles using similar routes, identical paperwork, and synchronized travel times. The National Crime Agency and Dutch authorities were closing in. They'd begun monitoring vehicle movements, comparing manifests, and quietly building a case. Skoon's men didn't know it yet, but each successful delivery was now another entry in a growing dossier of evidence. And one small mistake would open the door wide for the law. June 16, 2015. The quiet streets of Smethwick, West Midlands. It began like any other morning at a scrapyard just off the M5, until a Dutch-registered ambulance rolled through the gates. No flashing lights. No emergency. Just two men, one dressed as a paramedic, the other hobbling on crutches. For months, investigators from the National Crime Agency had been following the vehicle's every move. Ferry logs, CCTV footage, and customs data had converged into a single point of interest: this ambulance. When the NCA moved in, what they found behind the panel stunned even seasoned officers. Hidden within custom-built compartments were bricks of cocaine, heroin, and ecstasy, the same concealment method they had suspected but never confirmed until that day. The drugs were so densely packed that officers had to dismantle the walls with power tools. The discovery was no accident. The operation had been under international surveillance for months, aided by Dutch authorities and Europol. But what tipped the balance wasn't technology, it was human error. Inside the vehicle, investigators found a rivet gun, the same kind used to seal the hidden chambers. Forensic testing later matched DNA belonging to Leonardus Bielsma, Skoon's trusted lieutenant. That single oversight connected him, and through him, the entire organization, to the smuggling operation. Meanwhile, phone records and ferry manifests began drawing a pattern. Skoon's company had dispatched identical ambulances along the same route dozens of times. Each one bore legitimate paperwork. Each one now became potential evidence. But in the weeks before the raid, the atmosphere inside Skoon's circle had shifted. Drivers whispered about surveillance at Harwich port. One even reported seeing the same unmarked car near their loading site in the Netherlands. Another driver was questioned at customs and released, but the message was clear: the walls were closing in. Behind closed doors, some of the men began turning on each other. Dutch investigators later revealed that internal tensions and intercepted calls hinted that one of Skoon's lower-level operatives may have started cooperating. Whether motivated by fear or a plea deal, that whisper gave investigators the final thread they needed to pull. Then came the arrests. In coordinated raids across Birmingham and the Netherlands, police seized vehicles, phones, and false documentation. Skoon was detained without incident, his empire dismantled in a single day. But as news of the bust hit the headlines, rumors began to spread. Some believed not all the vehicles were found. Others claimed that a portion of the drugs, worth millions, was never recovered. Even investigators couldn't confirm the total number of trips completed successfully. Stories like this remind us, evil doesn't knock, it rides past with the sirens off. Subscribe now, before the next one passes you by. December 2015. Birmingham Crown Court. After one of the most complex cross-border drug investigations in British history, the men behind the fake ambulance empire finally faced justice. Olof Schoon, the Dutch organizer and controlling force, had turned medical transport into a billion-pound trafficking network. He admitted his role and was sentenced to 24 years in prison. Leonardus Bielsma, Skoon's right-hand man and skilled mechanic, built the secret chambers that hid the drugs. His DNA on a rivet gun exposed him completely. 28 years. Richard Engelsball, the trusted driver who made dozens of runs across the channel, helped deliver the shipments hidden behind stretchers and oxygen tanks. 18 years. The court called it the highly sophisticated, meticulously planned, and well-executed conspiracy, one that used the image of compassion to conceal devastation. Outside court, officers from the National Crime Agency and Dutch police called the discovery a landmark case. Forensic teams dismantled every recovered ambulance, each revealing identical, purpose-built concealments. The fallout was immediate. Ambulances seized. Assets frozen. Front companies dissolved. Every license, invoice, and tax record once used to mask the operation became evidence in one of Europe's largest drug convictions. But behind the celebration of justice, a warning lingered. Investigators admitted the method was so effective, so convincing, that other groups were already studying it. The ambulances had stopped, but the blueprint remained. For Olof Schoon, the clang of a prison door replaced the hum of an engine. The empire he built through deceit and precision now served as a warning to both criminals and investigators alike. In the months after the sentencing, British and Dutch law enforcement tightened the net. Border Force officers increased inspections on medical and emergency vehicles arriving from Europe. The National Crime Agency worked hand in hand with Dutch customs to flag modified transport vans and ambulances crossing the channel. the case forced a new awareness: how professional presentation could disguise criminal purpose. Legitimate logistics firms were audited. Ferry operators were trained to spot falsified documentation and unusual vehicle weight discrepancies. What had once been invisible now drew immediate suspicion. For investigators, that fake ambulance case became a blueprint in reverse, a guide on how to detect organized deception hidden behind credibility. It reshaped policies across ports and ferry terminals, especially on the Hook of Holland-Harwich route, once a favorite corridor for traffickers. Skoon's company registrations were dissolved, his assets confiscated, and every ambulance linked to his operation was destroyed. But the wider message reached far beyond the scrapyards. It showed that no disguise, however clever, could outlast diligence and patience. For the men involved, the price was heavy. Decades behind bars, families torn apart, reputations erased. And for the communities they helped poison, the damage could not be counted in money or weight, but in lives changed forever. It raised a question that still lingers in law enforcement circles today. How many more fronts, legitimate, polished, respectable, hide the same dark trade beneath their surface? In the end, those flashing lights weren't rescuing anyone, they were hiding one of the biggest drug operations in UK history. What looked like mercy on wheels was, in truth, a mobile empire of deceit. Olof Schoon's network collapsed, but the tactics he perfected, the forged uniforms, the fake patients, the flawless paperwork, continue to inspire traffickers across Europe. Behind every siren, every logo, every professional mask, there's always a question: what's real and what's a front? The ambulances may have stopped, but the road they paved still stretches forward, waiting for whoever dares to follow it. If this story shook you, hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell, because the next case will show you just how deep the smuggling networks still run.